Sit in the driver's seat of a 1996 Honda Civic, and the first thing you notice is the world outside. The hood line drops away so sharply it almost disappears. The roof pillars are impossibly thin by modern standards. You are not buried inside a bunker, you are connected to the road. There is a mechanical honesty here that has largely vanished. Modern economy cars feel isolated and heavy, burdened by layers of complexity. But this machine feels light, eager, and precise. It represented a peak in automotive engineering, a moment of clarity we did not realize we were losing until it was gone. To understand why this humble compact car matters so much, we have to look at the world that created it. It was not just about building a better car. It was a desperate bid to survive a financial crisis that threatened to wipe them out. The mid-1990s presented a unique challenge for Japanese automakers. The economic bubble had burst, and the value of the yen was punishingly strong against the dollar. Importing cars from Japan had become a financial liability. At the same time, environmental regulations were tightening, especially in California. Honda faced a difficult choice. They could retreat and build a cheaper, duller appliance, or they could double down on engineering. They chose the latter. This was not just about designing a car, it was about designing a manufacturing strategy. To bypass the currency crisis, Honda decided that 75% of the Civics sold in the United States would be built there. Factories in East Liberty, Ohio, and Alliston, Ontario became the heart of production. This was a massive commitment to North American manufacturing, ensuring that price increases could be kept to a minimum without stripping the car of its quality. It was a strategy of intentionality. By building locally, they could afford to keep the expensive aluminum engine blocks and the complex suspension geometry that defined the brand. It was a holistic approach to car building that feels incredibly rare today. Then there was the engine. The goal was efficiency, but not in the way we think of it today. Modern cars use turbos and complex electronics to cheat the wind and the sensors. The 1996 Civic did it with pure combustion science. The base 1.6-liter engine produced just 106 horsepower. That sounds modest now, but it was a technological milestone. Honda claimed it was the first gasoline engine ever produced to meet California's strict low-emission vehicle standards. They achieved this not by choking the engine, but by refining it. It is important to remember the stakes. The Civic was not just another model, it was the foundation of the company. In the mid-1990s, Honda did not have a massive lineup of sport utility vehicles to pad their profits. If the Civic failed to sell, or if it became too expensive to produce because of the yen, the company would face a crisis. This pressure cooker environment usually leads to conservative, boring choices. Yet the engineers managed to push the envelope. They created a car that was cleaner than anything else on the road, yet still fun to drive. They managed to navigate the complex web of international economics without losing the soul of the machine. This is where the philosophy of the era shines through. It was smart engineering rather than cost-cutting. They used aluminum blocks and heads to save weight. They refined the combustion chambers, yet they kept things simple where it mattered. They reused the proven 5-speed manual transmission designs because they were already perfect. They did not change parts just for the sake of novelty. Every component had to justify its existence. Consider the pressure they were under. Competitors like Toyota were releasing redesigned Corollas that were competent but uninspiring. Honda needed to maintain its reputation for engagement while satisfying the accountants. This delicate balance is what makes the 6th-generation Civic so fascinating. It stands at the intersection of the old world, where mechanical feel was paramount, and the new world of strict environmental responsibility. They accepted some compromises, certainly. They returned to rear drum brakes on many models to save money. They simplified the wheel choices, but they refused to compromise the powertrain's integrity. The 1.6-liter engine was a jewel. Whether it was the base model or the lean-burn VTECE in the HX Coupe, the focus was on clean, efficient power. The HX model was rated as a transitional low-emission vehicle. It achieved fuel economy numbers that hybrids would struggle to match a decade later, and it did so without a heavy battery pack. This was engineering through reduction, not addition. It was about making the machine as efficient as possible in its most basic form. But even the best engine means nothing without the right platform to carry it. If the engine was the heart of the 1996 Civic, the suspension was undoubtedly its soul. This platform utilized a four-wheel double wishbone suspension system, a design choice that stands as the single most significant differentiator between this era of Honda and everything that came after. To the casual observer, suspension geometry might seem like a dry, technical detail, but in the mid-90s it was a declaration of principles. At the time, this sophisticated setup was typically reserved for dedicated sports cars or luxury sedans. Seeing it under the fenders of an economy hatchback was akin to finding a Swiss watch movement inside a disposable plastic casing. It spoke to a refusal to compromise on the fundamental dynamics of the vehicle, regardless of its price point. The engineering advantage of the double wishbone layout is rooted in physics. By using two control arms, one upper and one lower, engineers could strictly control the motion of the wheel as it moved up and down. When a car with this suspension enters a corner and the body begins to roll, the double wishbone geometry actively pulls the top of the tire inward. This action, known as negative camber gain, keeps the tire's contact patch perfectly flat against the pavement. The result is a level of grip and stability that feels supernatural for a car of this size. It allows the driver to carry momentum through a turn with absolute confidence, providing feedback that is linear, predictable, and deeply satisfying. This decision was not made lightly, as it came with significant penalties. Double wishbone suspension is expensive to manufacture, requiring more parts and more assembly time than simpler alternatives. It also consumes valuable space. The upper control arms encroach into the engine bay and the rear cargo area, challenging the packaging engineers to find room for passengers and luggage. Most competitors, including the Toyota Corolla of the same vintage, opted for McPherson struts. Struts are cheaper, simpler, and more space-efficient, but they lack the dynamic fidelity of the wishbone setup. Under hard cornering, a strut-based suspension tends to let the tire roll over onto its sidewall, reducing grip and numbing the steering feel. By rejecting the industry-standard strut design, Honda accepted higher costs and packaging headaches to preserve the purity of the driving experience. The chassis itself was engineered to match the capabilities of the suspension. The sixth-generation body was not merely a carryover, it was a substantial evolution in structural integrity. By adding strategic body braces and refining the welding process, engineers increased torsional rigidity by approximately 10% compared to the previous model. This stiffness is the unsung hero of the car's character. A rigid body allows the suspension to do its work without the chassis flexing and absorbing the energy. It eliminates the rattles and shudders that often plague lightweight cars, imparting a sense of solidity that belies the vehicle's low curb weight. Beyond the geometry and the welding, there was a profound commitment to material quality that ensured these cars would endure. The unibody was constructed using extensive amounts of galvanized steel. This zinc-coated metal provided a robust defense against the elements, a critical feature for a car intended to serve as daily transportation in all climates. Honda was so confident in this corrosion protection that they offered a 5-year, unlimited mileage rust-through warranty. This was not a marketing gimmick. It was a testament to the thickness of the steel and the quality of the paint process. While no car is immune to the ravages of time and road salt, the resistance of this chassis to structural rot is a major reason why so many examples are still on the road today. There is a specific sensation one gets when driving a well-maintained example of this generation. It possesses a certain heft, a density that is difficult to quantify but impossible to miss. It does not feel tinny or fragile. The doors close with a reassuring sound, and the car tracks down the highway with the composure of a much larger vehicle. This stability is the direct result of that complex suspension, working in harmony with the rigid galvanized structure. It is a feeling of permanence, a sense that the machine was built to last rather than to be replaced. This chassis provided the perfect stage for the powertrain, allowing the mechanical purity of the drivetrain to shine without distraction. It was a golden era of structural engineering, creating a platform so good that it would become a legend. But a chassis, no matter how brilliant, is only half the story. To truly understand this machine, we have to look at the engine, and later, the interior design philosophy that is effectively illegal today. Under the hood of the 6th generation Civic lay the D-Series engine family, a marvel of aluminum construction that balanced durability with remarkable efficiency. These were not powerhouse drag racing motors, they were precision instruments designed for the real world. The entire engine block and cylinder head were cast from aluminum, a choice that significantly reduced weight over the front axle, further enhancing the car's agility. Inside the cylinders, iron liners provided the necessary toughness to handle hundreds of thousands of miles of friction. This combination of lightweight materials and robust internals created a power plant that was eager to rev, yet incredibly long-lived. It was a philosophy of sufficiency, providing exactly what was needed, executed to the highest possible standard. Among the lineup, the engine found in the HX Coupe stands out as a fascinating piece of engineering history. This model featured the VTEC E system, a variation of Honda's famous variable valve timing technology tuned specifically for fuel economy. At low engine speeds, the engine essentially operated as a 12-valve motor, swirling the air-fuel mixture to allow for an incredibly lean burn. This was not just about saving gas, it was about maximizing the energy extracted from every drop of fuel. The result was a car that could achieve highway mileage figures in the mid-40s, rivaling the complex hybrids that would arrive years later. It was a testament to mechanical ingenuity, solving modern problems with purely analog solutions. But the HX was more than just its engine. It was also the testbed for a transmission technology that would eventually dominate the economy car market, the continuously variable transmission, CVT. The 1996 Civic HX represented Honda's first foray into this technology for a production car. The goal was simple: keep the engine in its most efficient RPM range at all times. Unlike a traditional automatic with fixed gears, the CVT used a system of pulleys and a steel belt to seamlessly alter the gear ratio. This allowed the engine to hum along at peak efficiency, regardless of the vehicle's speed. It was a bold experiment, a glimpse into the future of transmission design long before it became the industry standard. Yet, as we will see, this innovation carried a fatal flaw that would eventually send most of these pioneers to the crusher. However, Honda knew that drivers accustomed to traditional automatics might find the sensation of a CVT strange. The rubber band effect, where engine noise rises before the car accelerates, was a concern. To combat this, engineers included a unique feature in the CVT design, a first hold clutch. This mechanism was designed to simulate the engagement of a traditional first gear, providing a more natural, connected feel when accelerating from a stop. It was a subtle touch, a nod to the driver experience even in a car focused entirely on efficiency. Later service manuals reveal that this clutch, along with the transmission fluid formulation, was revised over time, hinting that Honda was learning and adapting this new technology in real time. While the CVT was the headline innovation, the manual transmissions of this era were the quiet heroes. For the 1996 model year, the 5-speed manual gearbox was designated with the code S21. Interestingly, this was essentially a relabeling of the previous generation's Y21 transmission. The internals remained virtually identical. This was not laziness. It was a strategic decision rooted in efficiency. The existing design was already near perfect, crisp, reliable, and satisfying to use. By carrying over the proven internals, Honda could ensure reliability while simplifying their parts inventory. It is a perfect example of the smart engineering ethos. Do not reinvent the wheel if the wheel is already flawless. The reliability of these transmissions paints a contrasting picture of the era. The manual gearboxes have earned a reputation as being practically bulletproof. They are simple, robust mechanical devices that, with basic maintenance, will often outlast the car itself. The early continuously variable transmissions, on the other hand, proved to be more sensitive. They required specific fluid changes and careful maintenance to ensure longevity. The removal of the magnetic automatic transmission fluid filter in later revisions suggests that engineers were actively refining the design to address wear issues. This dichotomy, the unshakable durability of the manual versus the temperamental innovation of the continuously variable transmission, perfectly encapsulates the transitional nature of the time. Honda was pushing boundaries with new technology while relying on proven mechanical bedrock to keep the cars on the road. It was a moment where the future was being written, while the past was still very much present, providing a reliable foundation for experimentation. This blend of old-school durability and new-school efficiency created a powertrain that felt both familiar and revolutionary, a fitting heart for a car that straddled two eras of automotive history. The interior of the sixth-generation Civic offers a masterclass in a design philosophy that has effectively been outlawed. To sit in the driver's seat is to experience a level of visibility that modern safety regulations no longer permit. The cowl, the point where the windshield meets the hood, sits remarkably low. The glasshouse is upright and expansive, supported by pillars so thin they seem almost structural impossibilities by today's rollover standards. In a modern vehicle, the driver is cocooned within the thick pillars and high belt lines, isolated from the environment for the sake of crash test scores. In the Civic, the world is right there. You can see the road surface just feet in front of the bumper. This panoramic view does more for driver confidence than any blind spot monitoring system ever could. It creates a sense of spatial awareness that makes the car feel smaller and more manageable than it actually is. You can place the front tires on an apex with millimeter precision. Because you are not guessing where the car ends, you can practically see it. The controls themselves reflect an obsession with tactile feedback that has been lost to the age of touchscreens. Every interaction in the cockpit has a specific mechanical weight. The heating and cooling controls are not buried in a digital sub-menu. They are physical sliders and buttons that operate with a satisfying, consistent resistance. There is a distinct, audible click to the switchgear that communicates quality. It is the kind of industrial design usually found in high-end audio equipment, applied to an economy car dashboard. The steering wheel rim is thin and hard, transmitting the texture of the road directly to the palms. There is no filtered numbness here. When you turn the wheel, you feel the mechanical connection to the rack, a sensation that keeps the driver engaged in the act of piloting the machine rather than merely operating it. This philosophy of dignified simplicity extended to the trim levels. Whether you bought the base DX or the top-tier EX, the fundamental ergonomics remained the same. In 1999, Honda introduced the value package for the base models. This was not a luxury overhaul. It was a functional update that bundled air conditioning, a CD player, and an automatic transmission. It turned the basic transportation appliance into a complete livable space without adding unnecessary clutter. The interior did not try to impress you with faux wood or ambient lighting. Instead, it respected the driver by placing every necessary control exactly where the hand expected it to be. It was a workspace designed for the business of driving, proving that an economy car did not have to feel like a penalty box. The absence of digital distraction is perhaps the most striking feature when revisiting this cabin today. There are no screens fighting for your attention, no lane keep assist lights flashing on the dashboard, and no complex infotainment systems to navigate. The gauge cluster consists of simple, analog dials with orange needles that provide critical information at a glance. The connection between the human and the machine is unfiltered. You listen to the engine note to decide when to shift, rather than watching a digital prompt. You feel the car's speed through the chassis, rather than relying on a digital readout. However, even in this analog sanctuary, the creeping tide of regulation was visible. Midway through the production run, Honda added a clutch start interlock switch to the manual transmission models. Previously, you could turn the key and crank the starter without depressing the clutch pedal, a convenience for mechanics and a quirk of older cars. The addition of this safety switch, preventing the engine from starting unless the pedal was down, was a minor change, but it signaled a shift. The era of assuming the driver knew what they were doing was ending. The car was beginning to intervene, to add layers of safety logic between the operator and the mechanism. It was a subtle foreshadowing of the dramatic changes that were about to reshape the entire automotive landscape. The 1996 Civic was designed to empower the driver, but the industry was moving toward protecting the driver from themselves. This shift in philosophy would soon extend beyond safety switches. The real betrayal was not a switch. It was a boardroom decision that effectively escorted the engineers out of the building, bringing an end to the golden era. The turning point arrived with the dawn of the new millennium. The specific moment of the future changed can be pinpointed to the introduction of the 7th generation Civic in 2001. For enthusiasts, this was not just a new model year, it was a fundamental shift in corporate philosophy. The most controversial decision was the abandonment of the front double wishbone suspension. In its place, Honda installed McPherson struts. To the accounting department, this made perfect sense. Struts are significantly cheaper to manufacture and easier to assemble on the production line. They also take up less horizontal space, which allowed the designers to shorten the nose of the car and increase cabin space. They marketed this as a victory for passenger comfort, specifically highlighting the new flat floor design. But for anyone who loved driving, it felt like a betrayal. The magical handling characteristics that defined the Civic for over a decade were gone. The steering lost its intricate feedback, the front end lost its bite. The car no longer rotated through corners with the eagerness of a sports car. Instead, it plowed through them like a typical economy appliance. The engineering priority had shifted from dynamic excellence to packaging efficiency. The signs of this transition were actually visible during the final years of the 6th generation, if you knew where to look. The relentless pressure of the yen and the need to maintain profit margins led to subtle cost-cutting measures that foreshadowed the future. We saw the return of rear drum brakes on models that previously might have had discs. In 1997, the option for anti-lock brakes was removed from the EX Coupe, a puzzling move that placed cost savings above active safety. Even the innovative CVT transmission in the HEX model was not immune. Early versions had a magnetic filter to trap metal debris, but this was quietly deleted in later production runs to save a few cents per unit. These were small details, but they painted a clear picture. The era of over-engineering was ending. The bean counters were gaining control, and they were finding ways to trim the fat, even if it meant cutting into the muscle. However, before the light went out completely, there was one final glorious celebration of the old ways. The 1999 facelift brought the Civic SI Coupe back to the North American market. Known by its chassis code EM1, this car was a greatest hits album of 90s Honda engineering. It featured the legendary B16 engine, a dual overhead cam masterpiece that screamed to an 8,000 RPM redline to produce 160 horsepower. It came only with a manual transmission. It had 4-wheel disc brakes, a stiffer suspension, and it was available in a vibrant electron blue pearl paint that became an instant icon. The SI was a reminder of what Honda could do when they let the engineers run wild. It was sharp, visceral, and incredibly fun. But in hindsight, the EM1 SI feels less like a new beginning and more like a final curtain call. It was the last time a Civic would feel this raw and this mechanical. The industry itself was moving away from cars like this. By the early 2000s, the automotive world was shifting toward the disposable appliance. The rise of the SUV and the crossover meant that compact cars were no longer the primary focus of innovation. They were relegated to entry-level status, designed for people who viewed driving as a chore rather than a pleasure. The goal became to isolate the driver from the road, not to connect them to it. The 6th generation Civic stood as the last bastion of a time when an affordable car could still have a soul. It was built before electric power steering numbed the feedback, before high belt lines destroyed visibility, and before safety bloat made every car heavy and sluggish. The transition to the 7th generation proved that while cars would become safer, cleaner, and more spacious, something vital had been lost in the process. Walk through almost any parking lot today, and you will likely see one, a A faded green sedan or a silver coupe still doing the morning commute 25 years later. The survival of the sixth-generation Civic is not an accident of history. It is the direct result of the manufacturing ecosystem Honda created. Because these cars were built in such massive numbers, with hundreds of thousands leaving the factories every year, the supply of replacement parts is effectively infinite. If a front fender is damaged, there are thousands of donors in salvage yards across the continent. If an alternator simply fails, a replacement can be found at any auto parts store for the price of a nice dinner. This interchangeability extends to the mechanicals as well. The shared DNA between models means that parts from other Hondas of the era bolt right on. It is like an industrial Lego set, allowing owners to keep these machines running indefinitely with minimal investment. This accessibility birthed a vibrant enthusiast culture that views the chassis not as an appliance but as a blank canvas. The double wishbone suspension provided the perfect foundation for tuning. While other economy cars were ignored by the aftermarket, the Civic became a global icon of modification. From simple suspension drops to complete engine swaps, the platform could handle it all. It became the modern equivalent of the 1932 Ford, a cheap, accessible machine that could be transformed into anything the owner desired. This culture has played a massive role in preservation. Enthusiasts rescue these cars from scrap heaps, restoring them not because of their monetary value, but because they recognize the inherent goodness of the bones. They understand that once these chassis are gone, we will likely never see an affordable double wishbone compact car again. Of course, they are not immortal. The exhaust manifolds on the D-Series engines are notorious for developing hairline cracks, massive enough to fail emissions tests. The rear wheel arches will eventually succumb to rust if they live in the salt belt. The early continuously variable transmissions in the HX models have mostly vanished due to neglect, but these are known, manageable flaws. They are maintenance items rather than fatal defects. Unlike modern cars, where a failed transmission control module or a glitching infotainment screen can total the vehicle because repair costs are so high, the Civic remains repairable. It resists the concept of planned obsolescence. It was built in an era when a car was a durable good, something to be maintained and kept, rather than leased and discarded. It stands as a reminder of a time when the goal was to build the best possible machine for the price, not just the most profitable one. It was a statement that affordable transportation did not have to be a penalty box, but could be a genuine feat of enduring engineering. The 1996 Honda Civic truly represents the high watermark of analog economy car design. It was the final moment where engineering ambition outweighed the demands of the accountants, creating a machine that was far better than it needed to be. Preserving these vehicles is about more than nostalgia. It is about keeping a record of a manufacturing ethos we may never see again. If you once owned one of these engineering marvels, tell us your story in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep dives into automotive history.